Come on.
Or like this one? Yeah, come on.
To call the meeting to order, for the Pathway to End Gun Violence Advisory Committee. And then, I've been calling the clerk to do roll call.
Chairperson Sanchez is absent. Co-chair Corey Jones,
Here.
co-chair Diane Garlington is absent. The Tudo Manager here. Alan Williams,
Yes, correct.
Detective David Perez,
Here.
Michael Stevens,
Here.
Jill Van Lesden, absent. James Montero,
Present.
Lisa Pina Warren, present. Juan Carter is absent. Michael Oden,
Here.
DJ Fox,
Here.
nine present for absent, we have a quorum.
Awesome. So we can take some time to review the minutes from the last meeting. And then once we feel that we've reviewed them, someone can call for a motion to, pass the minutes from last meeting. I make a motion.
Who made the motion?
We have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Aye. All opposed? All right, looks like we have passed the meetings from the last minute. So now I want to open the floor to our presenters. Is that all right for me to do, clerk? For our open discussion?
So we're on item number 2 now?
Yes.
That's fine.
Yeah, so. Is that Mike and Michael Stevens? Whichever one you.
I've got a slideshow, I
Yeah.
can talk through, some of the programming that we're doing, the opportunities, that exist, so, yeah, I'll kind of go first.
Yeah, so Mike's up and then we'll have Michael Stevens go next meeting.
All right, so my name is Mike Hogan, I'm the Director of the Public Safety Grant Administration Office, and also the Governor's Criminal Justice Policy Board. We've been very active over the last 1.5 to 2 years. We had some vacancies on our board that have been filled by the governor, including the chairperson, and since we got our new chairperson, we've been very busy, particularly in the area of planning, strategic planning around criminal justice, but also because we've had several new grant programs pop up in the last couple of years, some from the next one, you can go to the next one. But particularly because of the coronavirus, but also because of the bipartisan Safer Communities Act that passed in 2022. So what I'd like to talk about here a little bit is some of the grant programs that we have in our office, where programs and activities connect back to community violence intervention, some of the topics that you're talking about. And also talk about some of the other grant funding opportunities. Last week, we talked about community violence intervention prevention initiative, but there are some other ones out there that connect back to the work. So, yeah, next slide. A little bit of background on our office. It actually goes back to 1969. It was known as the Governor's Justice Commission for a long time. In 2008, kind of got reorganized into the Department of Public Safety, sort of the Rhode Island State Police, like Central Management Office, and we're very difficult to find on an org chart. But the statute that established the office back in 1969 still stands, and it gives a lot of power to the office about coordinating, in particular between state agencies, around the response to criminal justice issues in the state of Rhode Island. And this is some of the grants that we have open right now. So we get a lot of formula grants that come in every single year. Juvenile justice and delinquency prevention, violence against women programming. There's some programming that enhances the forensic sciences at the crime lab, funding specifically for the crime lab and the medical examiner's office. Criminal history improvement program as well, about criminal history records that are sort of the backbone of background checks, the FBI background checks, to prevent people from getting firearms, dangerous individuals, raiding laws. So next slide. So Project Safe Neighborhoods, I know is something that's gonna sound familiar to a lot of the folks in the room. We've had some successful Project Safe Neighborhoods initiatives here in Providence. And the last several years, this funding has fluctuated dramatically. A long time ago, we did the project in the Lockwood neighborhood. I believe it was $1 million, $1.5 million. Right now, Rhode Island gets about $80,000 a year in Project Safe Neighborhoods funding. And as you can imagine, it's very difficult to do much of anything with that kind of money. We've done our best to spread it around, but recognize a couple of the issues that sort of come out of having successful initiatives like neighborhood disruptions and stuff like that, and its displacement. And really what we're doing now with the Project Safe Neighborhoods grant is recognizing that some of the violence that happens in the cities are interconnected. That is not necessarily neighborhood based anymore. A lot of this stuff is happening on social media. A lot of a lot of this is out on the internet now, and that's what we're hearing from the training school, Department of Corrections. But we're trying to recognize, particularly at a tactical level, not just having the chiefs in the room to agree that there are problems, but having like detectives in the room, sharing information, working with the federal task forces, really getting down to connecting guns, following the guns, right? It's really about the national ballistic database and following information about the guns, sharing information about the guns and tying guns to individuals, not necessarily just the individuals and at-risk individuals. It's a focused deterrence approach. We've had some meetings where we have officers from Providence, Pawtucket, and Central Falls come together and talk about their shooters and talk about their targets, the violent individuals in their communities, and sure enough, the same name appears on several of them. It's kind of born out of the idea that there were shootings outside of the district courthouse here in Providence, but the individuals and the shooters were from Pawtucket. The activity happened in Central Falls. So same thing at the mall, right? A lot of these things, like the mall is a gathering point. So it recognizes that the folks in Providence may not know when people from Pawtucket and Central Falls. So it's been an interesting approach on the law enforcement side. And certainly that funding has always been used to support initiatives out of the Nine Islands Institute. So we've had some, work with the street workers, and some school outreach, some formerly incarcerated individuals that go into schools and have conversations and stuff like that as far as public outreach goes. So we've been doing that since about 2018, and we're sort of at a point now where we got to take a look at how successful this has been and what we're doing in the future. So even right now, the Project Safe Neighborhoods Task Force is gathering the selection committee is going to be working kind of through the summer. One thing that Project Safe Neighborhoods also recognizes is that violence increases a lot in the summertime. So the summertime surge. So what kind of resources can we get out as well to address some of the increases in the summer? So Project Safe Neighborhoods, again, not as big as it used to be, but we still get that and we still try to pull good unit. The Victims of Crime Act Victim Assistance Program, usually known as VOCA. VOCA funding has fluctuated greatly over the last several years, but it's really about providing direct services to the victims of crime. It's a great program in that a lot of federal grants have very restrictive rules around how and when the money can be spent. And some of those rules don't exist in the VOCA program. VOCA funding can be used to provide basic immediate needs. So families that are trying to flee domestic violence and other situations that need a place to stay for the night, that may need food or basic supplies or diapers or groceries, agencies can provide this stuff. So the funding goes out of our office and goes out to the agencies. We did a quick look, and at least 13 of the agencies are headquartered in Providence. And we can talk about all kinds of programs through there, of course, the Nonviolence Institute, but I have an example I'd like to talk about. At one point, this funding, which is down around $3 million now, was up around $11 million. And we were able to take a lot of chances on programs that didn't exist because we had extra funding. So we could do the real grant thing, like try new things. And one of the programs was from the Providence Housing Authority, who approached us and say we have about 9,000 people that we are responsible for in the properties that we own around the city, the properties that we maintain around the city. And they wanted to start a sort of victim advocate office. They started, and so they used a grant from the VOCA program to bring on a victim advocate. And the immediate response was that folks in the neighborhood felt more comfortable approaching the advocate than picking up the phone and contacting law enforcement if they had issues or concerns. So domestic violence in the unit next door or whatever, something like that, they were far more comfortable speaking to the victim advocates This has been so successful that the Providence Housing Authority has actually increased the staff and increased the resources in this office as well. So that's all the populations that they deal with. So that's one that I've been really excited about, that folks were reluctant to try, but I really think it's shown that grant funding can prove out a theory or an idea and attract additional investments. Another good use of that funding, another neat thing about that funding, it can be used to support individuals who don't have their documented, and individuals who are undocumented, who are on the pathway. There's the U visa, and they have that wrong, but there's a visa that's available to folks who have experienced or have been subject to crime, victims of crime. And so we work with like Dorcas and other and Sojourner House as well to assist folks who are victims of crime who are here and don't have all the paperwork. So VOC is another excellent tool, and that's we're getting ready right now. We're at the end of a 3-year funding cycle. So in a few weeks, we're going to open up our grant application again for the VOCA program. Unfortunately, we're looking at a couple of $1 million less than we had last time we went out. But a lot of this funding has to go, at least 10% has to go to previously underserved populations. So we're always looking for new programs as a requirement of the grant as well. So we're going to open that back up. We're going to have to do probably more with less, but there are opportunities for funding and again, support some of the organizations even around the table here. And the next program I want to talk about is a new one. This is again born out of the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act that was passed in 2022. It's called the State Crisis Intervention Program. And it really is kind of focused around extreme risk protective orders. Those are the red flag laws that in particular police chiefs, law enforcement can petition the courts if they believe that there's an individual who is at risk to themselves or others to temporarily hold on to the fire. So it's a great funding source. I think it's up to $5 million over a few years that's coming in. The committee is forming right now in about planning how to fund that, and pretty soon that funding will become available competitively through our office as well. But it kind of has, and on the next slide, I have an example of some of the resources. So it's a national formula program. So what works in West Virginia does not work in Rhode Island, but there's a lot of flexibility around how it can be spent. A lot of it is around training, but also specialized courts, the great diversion programs that happen, veterans courts, mental health courts, and the other approaches, again, specifically courts that accept folks who have a history of firearm violations. Again, we're talking about diversion and deflection programming, behavioral health deflection programming. I'm trying to make sure that it ties into other initiatives around the state. So crisis intervention training and Thunder Mist and other programming that's happening all around the state from other funding sources. That might come from DHDDH and not through our office. So we're trying to make sure that we're not duplicating, but that we're complementing any other federal funding and programs that are happening around the state, city, and the country. So I think that kind of wraps up the brief program I wanted to talk about, some of the grants that we have, opportunities that are available now. But even as I say this, like right now, there's about 100 competitive grant opportunities available on grants.gov through the Department of Justice, and some of them are program specific, and some of them are formula, some of them are research. They're only looking for one award, some of them are looking for many. It's very competitive, but our office works particularly well around that coordinating aspect, that we can sit in the middle and we have the policies and procedures to make sub-grant awards and monitor sub-grant awards and assist people in the process and provide training and technical assistance to people who receive the awards because of our experience doing it. So in some cases, grants may be organization, maybe the best applicant, but in some cases you need partnerships. You might need to have DCYF or somebody else that's part of the project. That's kind of where we come in. It's a multi-agency thing, but we certainly stand by as a resource for anybody who's working on competitive, or anybody who's putting together federal grants. You know, we speak the language and have assisted anybody who's called and asked. So we are a resource for those interested in approaching federal grants. So, all right, that's a bunch of stuff about some grants and a couple of our program examples. Any questions, any ideas, anything you want to talk about? I can do my best.
Mike, thank you so much, and I apologize to the committee for my lateness, my tardiness. I think something that's super important that we try to, at least in my opinion, figure out rather sooner than later is, I don't know if you keep track of what type of grants from the Department of Justice are coming into Rhode Island. Through, directly to the nonprofits or through you. But I think just to make sure that we're not duplicating work is figuring out, what agency, is receiving said grants from the Department of Justice and other sources, and, are applying to, because we don't want multiple groups or members of this committee and other outside groups that are doing similar work to be applying for the same grants. So I think coordination and, I know, not to put PJ on the spot, but I know he mentioned something about applying for a certain grant. And I told him, we obviously aren't quite ready to be doing that, quite yet. So if there's certain grants that folks are applying to, for us as a, council to either write letters of support or do anything else, in that nature to support, each other as much as possible.
I get announcements when federal grants are made to anybody through the Department of Justice, are made to anybody in the state of Rhode Island. I don't, applications are, I wish, because, you know, I know sometimes I know agencies are competing against each other, and I just from hearing about it, but I don't necessarily see on the application side. If it's a state agency, I can see it, but if a nonprofit or the city or somebody else, the state has a new grants management platform that lets us see, that gets right to that idea about coordinating and making sure you're not duplicating or competing against yourself. So you're absolutely right about that. So I know when awards have been made, I find out that. And I usually try to send that around. If I know it's going to complement other things that we're doing, I do try to raise awareness, about what's going on. You're absolutely right, but sometimes you can compete against yourself and it's something.
I have a question, Michael. Is there kind of in line with Miguel is saying, but a little off track with that. So a lot of times the public and nonprofits don't know. So what's the trying to think of the proper word here? How do we get the word out?
Yeah, so there's grants.gov is the federal clearinghouse for all federal grants, and actually, yeah, all federal grants and it's same for all contracts. So grants.gov is there, and now the state has launched it, the e-civics. So now there's a centralized state grants management office where they also publish these opportunities as well. So you get in there and see it. With the Department of Justice, or even with the federal government, it's like certain time of year. Like last month was the Health and Human Services grant. This month is Department of Justice grant. So right around the spring, usually is when these competitive grant opportunities are posted, and they usually award them in the month of September. So you put in your applications now, here by the end of September, if you got the award or not. So you're around January, some of them may start popping up. And there is a language to it, right? Some of this, you can, even if I point you in the right direction, you kind of have to know, oh, is it competitive? Is it not competitive? Is this, how many awards are they making? Are they looking for a national? Sometimes you see a great opportunity, but they're looking for one national pilot project sort of thing. So it can be, but that's where we come in. I'm trying to improve our agency's website, which is justice.ri.gov. I'm trying to improve that to have a, again, how do I coordinate from the grants.gov portal to like share that information? I'm working. Also, other than being able to find them yourself, yeah, that's really much. Sir,
Is there any of those grants or projects? I know we talked about SIP, which is the State Crisis Intervention Grant, that need this type of public body at a local level to kind of satisfy some of your requirements.
well, the State Crisis Intervention Program does have a local pathway requirement, right? And that's one of the challenges in Rhode Island, that's unique to Rhode Island, is that there isn't a county, there's our cities and towns are individual, and we have like one state government. We're uniquely poised to do great statewide projects, but this has a rule that you have to pass it through to a city or town or whatever.
Is there a certain percentage?
Yeah, maybe up to 40%. And so certainly Providence is an ideal destination for that. I think the process is still getting worked out and that committee comes together and then how it gets posted, but there's a minimum pass through. That's what, so.
Thank you.
Yeah. And there are other funding opportunities, right? So the JAG grant is one you hear about a lot as well, the Justice Assistance Grant. So Providence gets an award directly, comes right to the Providence Police Department usually, but we have some available as well competitively from the state side of things. So some projects may fit in to the statewide, which we really opened that up quite a bit as well. We have several years backed up because of the sanctuary city litigation that goes back to 2018 and 2017. So we have several years that are free that we need to program as well. So we'll be looking for initiatives.
Okay. So the other, the BJA website has an interactive map too. That you can drag over Rhode Island, you can see which awards have been made, both on a state and a local, like a nonprofit local level.
What'd you say that it was?
BJA, it's OJ.
Yeah, the Bureau of Justice Assistance.
I don't have the exact
Yeah.
website on my head, but
No, I can find it and I can send it, right, you're right about that, there is one now that it will show you state by state.
in to Alan's question too, I think it might be interesting for this committee to look at that list and then invite organizations from that list to come in and present on their project to see if there's a way that we can help plug more people or more resources into those.
That's a good point. It's a really great point, thank you.
So originally I wanted to include some crime statistics,
Yeah.
in this, and there was kind of some talk about including crime statistics, but I took a look at what I have access to in my office, which is the data that is reported up to the FBI, the Uniform Crime Reporting or the National Incident Based Reporting Service. All law enforcement reports it up to a unit of the state police who compile it all, send it up to the FBI. It's aggregate, it's numbers, it's, can be translated into statistics and stuff like that. But I took a look, for example, if I want to look at calendar year 2023, the state of Rhode Island had listed for the city of Providence 11 homicides, but when I looked at the Providence Police Data Portal, it had 14 homicides. So I wasn't confident in standing in front of everybody and giving a report on that until we kind of suss out some of the differences in the data. So I do think Providence Police has some excellent data work. And I think if we wanted to bring them in, it may be a good invite for the next committee to talk about, because they're gonna have, and that may come down to the definition of data, what the FBI's definition of a homicide, as much as you might think it's not, but it could be about that, where Providence considers it something else. But that's one of the struggles I ran into, just trying to do like a little bit of a trend analysis or whatever. Data just doesn't match what Providence is publishing versus, what I would use, which is that NIBRS database from the FBI, so.
That's a really good point, Mike, because I mean, I like to take pride in speaking about facts and data, and I mean, that's kind of like what I'm learning into now, is like data in itself is so diverse and so different from different parts, and so yeah, I think it's important that we have the right data. So that being said, I think Providence Police is gonna share for the next committee meeting on Providence statistics and data. And I just want to thank Mike Stevens for being here today, for sure, being part of the committee.
Sounds like a good transition. So if there are any more questions or anything, we can turn it over and the other presenter, right? So.
Mr. Chair, before we do that, can we enter his presentation into the record as an exhibit, is it okay?
Yeah, can I have a motion, please? Motion.
Second.
Made by PJ, second by Corey. Yeah, so I don't think anyone else has a pre-planned presentation. Unless I'm mistaken, right? So that being said, I think a really critical, important next step that was actually brought up by Juan, part of their committee member, who wasn't able to be here today. So he has, he brought a couple of points in, and the first one, the first section, are more of like concerns than points. But the first suggestion that he mentioned, which I agree 100%, that we should all be somewhat on the same page before moving forward, is creating some sort of mission or vision for this body to move forward, just to have something that kind of brings us in back together, because I think by the experience of the last meeting, there's just a lot of passionate folks here, very intelligent folks that have so much different experience, and I think if we don't have something that brings us back in together, the chances or the likeliness of this community going in a million different places is pretty likely. So I think we take the next 5 minutes or so, just to let folks have an opportunity to speak on not necessarily why they're here, but some of, I guess, the values and principles that they would like to see in that mission. And I think we can work from now to the next meeting to get that established. We could take a vote next meeting on it to make sure folks are supportive of it. But I guess I can start. And for me, it's pretty simple. I mean, as a young person, a Latino here, man here in the city of Providence, this issue and just the threat of gun violence and violent crime in our communities is something that has always been there and is increasing as access to guns is easier, as social media evolves and it's easier to locate folks, and the lack of supportive services around socioeconomic impactful pieces of legislation. So that's really my reason on why we should have created this committee, advisory council, and having the mechanisms and tools to address such issues is something that we're seeing more and more. Like folks have mentioned, there's a lot of great opportunities. Our own Attorney General has created an office around community violence intervention. So this is, in my opinion, a very important, critical time in our history, our nation's history, really. But more specific to Providence, having collaborative partners like Chief Perez and Director Stevens, even the mayor for having folks from his office, from his policy team. This is a collaborative approach that is going to put a lot of minds together to hopefully continue building sustainable solutions to this issue. So I know I'm kind of just flapping at this point, but that's really kind of where I would like to see the mission, the vision of this body. If anyone wants to add.
Yeah, I can go next. I mean, mine starts with lived experience. My father was incarcerated. Most of the men in my family were either incarcerated or victims of gun violence. And 3 years ago, when I worked with the governor as a policy advisor, I put together a proposal for $17 million of the ARPA money to go towards grants that would do this exact type of work, community violence intervention. And, you know, at the time I was really devastated to not get that on the budget. But, you know, after spending some time in a state agency, I realized that, you know, that 17 million would have been nice, but it would have been temporary dollars that would have dried up. And that we have state agencies that, you know, we have a $13 billion state budget, and we have dollars that are going towards social services and are going towards programs that intersect with this work. And that if we can work with the existing funding streams we have, figure out what dollars are the most discretionary, right? And braid it together in a way with federal dollars, we can create something that's sustainable and that can be funded year over year. So, you know, at the Department of Labor and Training, my division is the Governor's Workforce Board. And, you know, we spent last year about $41 million. And, you know, I'd say about 70% of that went to community-based organizations and employer training, employers that are doing like training programs. And if we use, you know, $2-3 million of those dollars to serve the population where we're targeting, we could virtually reduce crime by, you know, 60 to 80%, right? 20-30% year over year, we can reduce crime. And so, you know, for me, I think the biggest piece is figuring out how we can use existing resources and plug them into the people who need them the most. Because, you know, under Director Weldon's leadership, we've changed a lot of our funding to community-based organizations. But think about, you know, there's 46 plus state agencies, right? So how much money are people sitting on that could be used for this same work, and they could also be meeting their metrics, their performance metrics as well. So yeah, that was my big aha moment, and I think this group could be really pivotal in getting those people to present, and then, you know, coming together with asks, right? We all have asks, you know, that we can ask presenters on how can we use those dollars, right? How can we, you know, collaborate with you to make sure those dollars reach, the people who need it the most?
Councilman, I want to say thank you for, putting this together and being part of this advisory council. The most important thing for me to be on this, council is very important that we have so many great leaders in our community. We have so many great people doing great work. I think that what's the challenging part is bringing all those great leaders together and try to get them together. And if we become one, we can do a lot of work in this city. I think that what's happened is that everyone's doing the work, but they're not bringing it together for us all not bringing it together to make sure that we are trying to prevent gun violence, right? Like, I know the work that Lisa's doing. She does great work for the nonviolence. I know the work that Alan and Kobe does. They do a lot of great work. There's so many people in this community that's doing so much great work. The police department and the community engagement and the tech, they're doing so much great work. But if we bring everyone together, I think, and we brainstorm and bring the state and bring this, the stakeholders in here, I think we can do much better. So I think that's why part of me being here is I want to make that happen. I'm that kid from West End who grew up on the West End. I seen all my friends get killed. I seen my friends do bad things. I believe that in the position that I'm in, I'm be able to help. And I think that if we can really, really come strong, if this council can really come strong, we can really make a difference and try to help as many youth in the city of Providence that we can.
And I like to say your point. So Mike is spot on, and the first meeting we had here, and the first thing coming through the door was collaborative, right? And James and I have talked about that many times. I may not have a big review, I may not like it, right? I kind of like everyone, but you know what I'm saying, just putting it out there. You may not get along with different personalities and different things, and then people have organizations, they're like, oh, my organization is the greatest, I don't want to deal with this person, so forth and so on. So I think that is the key to move forward. Tagging with other things, but that I would say specifically first and foremost for me, I think that's the key. And then I would say from Corey's perspective, it's personal. I grew up in Boston, I grew up in Roxbury. I wear a tag on my arm, tattooed, so when I'm speaking to the kids, they can see that I've been in the depths of hell. And I can't even count how many friends of mine who have been murdered, mainly gun violence, but also from stabbings, also from assaults. And then the prison, I would probably say, I probably know 100 people who've been in prison, like easily, with Rhode Island tied into that, now that I live here, and it's a small community, Providence, and all of these killings, and then they're not solved. So those things are very important to me, and that's what.
I guess before we move forward, I kind of just put out like my opinions. Does this body, does anyone have thoughts on having a mission statement or a vision statement? What are folks' thoughts on that?
I have something that's just a little bit different from what everyone's discussing, and I think that when we do get to our stats, and I'm sure that those of you who have seen stats over time might agree, even though it's a little bit left. The numbers are actually down for the most part, when you talk about all kinds of violent crime, homicide, we spoke about, you mentioned our numbers for homicides used to be in the 20s.
Right.
And they're down. I think that we have a serious perception problem. And I think a lot of it comes from social media and from the advent of smartphones and everything being like, if you grew up in it, Mike mentioned West End, I grew up on the South Side, Chicago, right? Boston. You knew because you saw it, but you also knew people who had no idea what was going on outside of it. And I think now everyone sees what's going on, as opposed to how we grew up, where you didn't have these smartphones and everybody did. So I think that part of that mission should be to attack the perception Because if you look at it, the numbers for actual shootings, the numbers for homicides, a lot of these numbers are actually down, trend wise. They're not climbing like you would think if you're watching social media, if you're seeing, but it's just that everything that happens is now in your face.
It just waits you hear the numbers, when you hear the numbers of how many guns they took off the street. It's gonna be crazy when you hear these numbers. So when we bring this to our next meeting, we'll give you all those statistics and you will not believe how many guns is in our streets. You could not believe it. So.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying, when we give you that, so that's what we'll make sure, I think, find what statistics come with it. So we'll make sure you have that next meeting, okay?
Just quickly before we move on, in regards to Detective Perez's comments, that's such a hard balance, in my opinion, to figure out or message correctly. So I mean, to your point about the perception, we're never gonna get the Fox News or Facebook watchers to be in good faith when it comes to crime in our city. We know they have their perceptions made and judgments, and no matter what we do. But at the same time, I do wanna stress the importance of just one homicide in the city, in my opinion, is valid enough to be in this room and to ensure that we keep that trend going down. So I think it's important to try to balance that conversation now as much as possible, as we don't wanna create or keep inflating that perception of, oh, it's a dangerous crisis city, but just one murder in the city, in my opinion, is it's a crisis to that community, to those families. So that's something we should keep conversation or talking about as we move forward. I'm gonna go reach out and then I'll come back to you, Corey.
Well, you kind of stated exactly what I wanted to say. For me, it's very personal. Like Mike, I grew up on the West End and I grew up on the South Side in Washington Park, and I've lost countless friends and family members. And over the years doing this work, I've sat beside countless mothers, sisters, brothers, and like you said, one is more than enough, right? And what I also wanna state is that, growing up, we were those people, right? The hood was those people, right? It affected our communities, right? It's no longer true. It's affecting everyone's community, right? And we know the old saying that bullets have no name, right? But now when I respond to hospital responses, whether it's the adult side or Hasbro, I'm meeting families from Coventry, Warwick, Cranston. They no longer look like black and brown families. Yeah, those numbers are still high, but we see such diversity now. And some of it is so random, which are drive-bys or road rage, arguments, you know what I mean? So that's what's really scary for me. And I agree, numbers are down, but don't feel down to me when I get the calls, and stabbings, so stabbings as well. I mean, it's just, one is more than enough, so I agree wholeheartedly with that.
Yeah, and I just want to remind folks that, I mean, we're going to continue having super healthy conversations. They're going to be difficult at times, and we got to remind each other that we all come with a different perspective and experience. And so as long as I think we keep the conversations respectful, I welcome and encourage folks to speak up and give us your side of things. Did someone else have their hand up? I'm gonna, Corey, and then we'll work the way down.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think that there is a balance between the two, and I think, when I hear that, I hear building on the success that has led us to continually decrease crime, right? And, acknowledging, that people at this table are the reason why that exists, and telling the story about how we continue that work in a way that's, effective. But, I was telling Miguel, the other Miguel, that, what really got me into this work was reading a book. And in that book, it talked about how Providence was a pioneer, the Nonviolence Institute specifically in the street outreach worker program, right? So we have programs here that have been nationally recognized But, you know, we have a nationally recognized workforce program and a nationally recognized crisis outreach worker program. Imagine if we connected those together, you know, what we could create there, right?
Yeah, I was just gonna add, created a few, benefits organizations. And one thing about mission, vision, values is that when people start to stray off, it brings everybody back together and keeps us focused on what's the mission opposed to drifting away from that. So I think this is a good thing to do, is to get consensus on what is all of our mission. And always keep us, accountable to that. From the east side. And some of my experiences, like I've watched my friends become friends. And I've watched them go away forever. And now start to come back home. And the damage that it has done to the victims, the damage it's done to their children. I've had a lot of their children in programs that I've done. And again, when I go up to high security, because I work in all the facilities at the Department of Corrections, some of the faces that I see in there, it's like, it's hurtful. I know what high security is, and it's 23-hour-a-day lockdown. And when I go up there to see Lavelle, which is Calvin Poston, which is my best friend's nephew, and he's sitting behind a glass because his cousin just got murdered, trying to express to me that he can't breathe this, go through this right now. It's like, so I know what's happening. He's probably stuffing this more and more, becoming more angry, and then coming out here. So the work, I guess for me is like, I just don't like seeing that. I think there's something we can do to prevent it, before prevent things. I believe wholeheartedly that we can prevent things before they get to that stage. I have been in positions myself where I have come close to being done. And I know, but for the grace of God, my mother, the messages, my family, and, you know, so I think there's things that can be done. I hope that as a result of everybody coming together, working together, all sides of town. Keith Morton said, I worked with the Institute. I wasn't really a street work, I did the program.
You were.
I did, I mean.
We're all
mainly
workers.
programs. But I remember something that Keith Morton had said to us a while ago. He said that, and I understood this, that from the east side, sometimes we feel boxed in because you have nothing but affluence across Hope Street, where you're really not welcome. Then on the other side of town, you really can't cross this side of town, so you have these 16 blocks that you're stuck in, which I'm sure you're aware of these 16 blocks. But he said, there's one place that you really can't lay claim to, says, but if we stockpile resources over here, we bring these, we don't really supply these resources. We stockpile over there, we don't supply these resources. He said, but by stockpiling resources everywhere, he says, because you really can't have resources in one place and think that the other side of town can access those resources. Which made sense, and I know that because when I brought East Side kids to the Institute, they were immediately approached by other kids. What is he doing in here? And they never came back. So one place was downtown, it's a neutral place, but every other place needs to be brought together. And through organizations, I think that through the Institute, through Chad Brown Alumni Association, through Colby's org, through this, because we have the kids, if we bring us together, we bring the kids together.
Absolutely. Starts with us.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Sorry.
Absolutely.
Well, we'll have public comment at the end. Just,
Okay.
committee members, thank you guys for being here though. Jeff,
I wanted to put out there, because I know, as we talk about orienting ourselves to a mission and, around maybe defining the violence a little bit, because I know we're certainly talking about youth violence, gun violence, gang-oriented crime violence, but I think we'd be foolish to ignore that, of those 11 homicides, how many were intimate partner violence, domestic violence, or something else that a lot of times law enforcement gets called for wellness check, or something that turned into a firearm related incident or something like that. And the other point being that 2016, we talked about, like 0 is possible, so why, there's no reason to stop, like you can have 0 years, it's not possible, so there's no reason to let up. Certainly don't have the same level of experience, but I lived on, over by Canada Doyle, one of the city, I lived by Canada Doyle for a while, but I wasn't. I was working for the Boy Scouts at the time.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so I think that, I think it's important to think about the violence, I think about, and suicide as well. So if you look at that pie chart of fatalities, firearm related fatalities, usually about 60% is self-inflicted or the perfectly legal gun owners who have a moment of crisis and make a permanent decision. Intimate partner violence and then, gun crime, gang crime and accidents kind of following them. So something I think if we're gonna kind of try to define and point us towards violence, we should kind of think about.
No, that's a really good point, Mike. Thank you. In regards to the mission and vision, I think something just in terms of logistical, like what would make sense. I think I'll have either Miguel or policy director Aaron reach out to everyone by email, or if someone prefers a different communication by email. I think it's fun to let us know, but I think most folks here have responded to email. But just to get your thoughts and what you would like to see out there, and then we'll have something at least in a draft form for the next meeting, just so we can get going on that. PJ, did you have something on?
No, I said pigeon.
Sorry.
That's your preferred method of communication.
Do we have any pigeons on the city payroll?
Let's see what catches you out.
But I do like what you were saying, Mike, to define violence. I think often, suicide violence is not thought of in street violence all the time, but, I feel like recently most of the people I've lost have been street guys that got out of the streets, but, just the things that they did haunted them until they, end up harming themselves. So I do think that's a missed issue, especially in this work, but I do think that it's a very prevalent issue that, we should think about, how we address as well as I think, the victims, the family members as well, right? So, growing up, my father being in prison didn't necessarily, I don't remember him being in prison, but I do remember my mom doing everything, right? I remember my mom being overburdened. I remember my mom taking care of the other, my cousins and stuff because, my uncles were in prison as well, right? So I think that's also a missed issue as well as, the families and how they're impacted from violence.
And adding to that piece, just think about that. Father was in jail, like a lot of us, right? Father was in jail. Mom was working 2 jobs. Who's really taking care of our kids? Who's really taking care of those kids? No, right? So basically what they're doing is they're finding a group of people who's gonna also love them out in the streets. That's who they hang with. That's who they grew up with. They grew up with those people. So now the dad comes home and try to discipline. It ain't happening now because he wasn't there for many years, right? That's what happens. This is the story of inner city. Like, this is true, right? They go to school, they act out because they don't want to be there because they got a lot of stuff going on in their life. Their father's in jail, their mom's working 2 jobs, no one there to feed them, no one there to love for them. We wonder why they act that way. That's the reason why. We all got to be honest. It starts at home.
Yeah. And
then we start at home, and then we, as leaders, try to help those kids. Because they're missing a big key part. If it doesn't matter if their mom or their father, they're missing a big key part. I was one of those kids, right? Lucky that some of us had mentors who took us out of those areas and made us be able to do other things. But that's what's happening. So we have to do our best job to try to help those kids, but also try to mentor the adults and tell them how these kids are being hurt. This we forget. Everyone thinks like we point here, we point to school teachers, we point to police department, we point to each other. But really, guys, honestly, it really honestly starts at home. If we're all sitting here being honest with you. Cause I know it, cause I lived it. And that's, that's and I'm not saying all, I'm not saying 100%, trust me, I'm not, but the percentage is high.
I agree with you. I had a similar experience.
And then I would think you have to input drug use.
Hmm?
Because the drug use.
Yeah,
It's actually huge. A lot of these kids are doing things and you're just thinking they're being violent because they're violent. No, they're on drugs.
Yeah.
And I have to remind them sometimes when talking to the kids and they're very, very, volatile towards me. And I'm trying to have a conversation and I'm like, oh, wait a minute, you have to remember, this kid is probably on drugs or doing some type of drug, which is affecting his mindset and the interaction. So that's a really big thing. I know a lot of young kids who are on drugs.
You got a kid now who's on a mentorship program, we do the inside out mentorship program, inside prison, outside. Kid been paying his mother's rent since he was 13 years old.
There it is.
He's been selling drugs.
Yeah.
His mother is on drugs, his father's not in a picture. And I said a lot, I watched my friends, so those were actually the ones that happened to were actually probably the nicest kids in middle school that were bullied and really, and this kid, that's what he goes with, he's getting money, and he's being taken advantage of, so he got clipped up because of that. He needed protection in order to basically, he's pushed out there to survive, but at the same time, it's not built for it. So he ends up with older people who use him for other things. But
And that's why I love that we're here. Because that's what it's about.
No, and thank you, Mike, for bringing that point out, because I think everyone in this table understands that. I mean, everyone in their city is just a product of their environment, and although I don't think this committee is gonna address or find solutions to all the social economic issues that are facing in our community, it's important to recognize those and to also advocate or talk to the right people. Because then we can do as much work as we want around community violence prevention, but if a kid and a family doesn't have food on their meal or a roof over their head, I mean, you're gonna do what you gotta do at the end of the day. So it's important that we are addressing some of those concerns, and that's what I really back and support some of the community violence intervention initiatives that are happening, because they really do address some of those socioeconomic challenges that families face. Does anyone have any thoughts, comments, questions before we move into our public comment?
Just wanted to say one thing. My name's Hannah, I'm from the law department. You folks are discussing the mission statement and possibly communicating via email. Just like to caution you, if you want to maybe submit a draft of your proposed mission statement by email, but caution you against having a discussion about that mission statement or possible variations of it, because you could inadvertently create a quorum in an email chain. And if you are discussing committee matters and there is a quorum, even in an email chain or a text message, you could be in violation of the Open Meetings Act. So it's just a caution, just something to keep mindful. I suggest maybe submitting drafts to Mr. Chairperson and then attaching it to the agenda for next meeting and discussing those drafts at the next meeting as a possible way to be able to communicate those, but not be in violation of OMA.
Thank you so much for that. I'll make sure we reach out to folks individually on our end. Thank you.
All of a sudden, the pigeons seem pretty good.
I don't think pigeons can have a quorum.
Chair and everyone else, excuse me, but I have a 2:30 appointment I have to make.
Thank you.
Take
Yeah,
care.
if no one else has anything, I think there's a public comment by Alan.
Yeah, I wrote it down. It helps me not have in there.
Can you just say your name?
Oh, sure. I'm Del Rayson. Hi, Beth. And I'm from Rhode Island Moms Demand Action. I'm a volunteer. It helps Moms Demand Action. Your mission statement contains a definition of CBI. I know Corey had one at the very first meeting in this PowerPoint. And here's why it's helpful to us as your advocacy supporters. We and other advocacy group allies in the community like the UU Church, like the RACAGV, and the higher ed groups around town, who often have student groups who would be very interested in the work that you intend to do with community-based interventions against gun violence. These would help us if the mission statement is available to us in its printed form. And here's why. Because we can read it at our meetings, we can become more truly, we can buy into it and embrace it. And this is where we have to change and we have to adapt. We've always been advocacy groups that advocate for the victim, that advocate for the surviving family. And we've been passionate about that, but we need to more. We need to advocate for the health of our whole community. And we need your assistance with your good definition in front of us in order to make that transformation of ourselves. So that we're constantly advocating for the community and the health of the community. And that's where it's important to us to have copies of your mission statement, printed copies, electronic copies, and for us to begin this advocacy group to advocacy group conversations and contact, so that we all begin to buy into it the way that you all have had a chance to buy into it in your lived experience and in your professional work. We have to do that in the advocacy community too. We want to, that's why we're here. We want to, but we need that. I think we need a concise definition that we can use as a touchstone, because as you actually implement your big plans in the community, we need to go back to it. This is why we're in it with them. This is why we want them to succeed. That'll be our touchstone. Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie.
Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie. I just want to thank Valerie and Jean from Mom Demand and a lot of other advocacy groups in Providence for being here. And we're definitely excited to have your support as we move forward, and I think it can be as collaborative as possible in this work. Miguel.
Introduce myself. Hi everyone, for the record, my name is Eli Youngs. All of you have received emails from me about this advisory council. I'm sort of here to help the chair through the office. So sounds to me like between this meeting and the next meeting, there's going to be some organizing necessary, everyone's thoughts, everyone's contributions for the mission statement. I'll do my part to prevent an open meeting violation. That's why the emails all go out in BCC. That's our way of preventing that. So I just wanted to introduce myself and let you know that any sort of questions can come my way. Any organizing, I would encourage you to send it to the chair, co-chairs, and you can include me on that. Of course, if it's like sort of personal correspondence with the chair, you don't have to include me. Anything about like the process and the organizing here, if you include me, I can be really helpful to all of you for just doing my part of making like a cohesive agenda going into the next one. So I just wanted to introduce myself and let you all know, feel free to reach out to me at any time.
Thank you.
Silly question. What is this thing we keep talking about violating? I don't want to violate something.
Don't answer email, okay?
No, it's called the Open Meetings Act. So essentially, it's a way to say, like, here, we're a committee of the government of Providence, and we need to give the public an opportunity to say, I want to listen in on this committee meeting, or I want to be here. So it violates it if committee members, if you have a quorum, so there's 12 people, 7 of you get together, have dinner, you talk about stuff that's going on the committee, you created a quorum, and now you're discussing committee matters, and the public doesn't have a chance to be there to hear what's being said, to comment on what's being said, which is why we have like a public discussion section generally in these kinds of meetings. So it's just to be cautioned. If it's 2 of you having a couple beers, it's a different story, but when there's a quorum, so like an email chain where everybody's commenting on stuff, or a text message chain where everybody's having a chance to read and comment on stuff, technology, you can inadvertently create a quorum.
Understood. No, I don't.
This is the line of transparency.
Yeah.
I get it, I just. That's like one of those understanding that.
We're not going out to dinner, guys. Not normal.
Rule.
Does anyone else have anything before we adjourn? Is everyone good to do another meeting, maybe like the first or second Wednesday of June? Just kind of my timeline.
It's the best.
Look at like specific.
No, because I was presenting, I want to make sure I'm here.
I will be here.
June, you won't be here?
The second week of June, I'm fine, but the first week.
That's a good call.
Yeah, the 12th. If that's the 12th, that's fine, but it's that week of the.
Well, make sure you go to the CDI 24th. That's when the conference is, right? We didn't-
24th and 25th.
Yeah.
Make sure you do that.
DOJ grants due on the 10th, so, yeah, we won't see.
So I think, we'll probably go June 12th unless folks change, but of course we'll go on Michelle and confirm. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Thank you all for being here. Second by Director Stevens, made by Corey Jones. Co-chair Jones. Thank you, guys. Have a great day.
Thank you.
You as well.